This video is going to demonstrate how to work with images inside of HTML and CSS, as well as how to save those images using Photoshop and Illustrator. After you've logged into your Blackboard course for Web Design 1, click on the Demos link, and then scroll down to where it says Images and File Paths. You're going to see a couple of links here. The one that we need is the image demo zip root folder, so right-click on that and save link as. And we want to save it to our Web1 folder, demos, and then just save it right in here. And then go inside of your Web1 folder, demos, and then as soon as that is done downloading, just double click on that file. Okay, double click. And then you can delete the zip file, and you're going to see a series of folders and files in here that are already made for you. As usual, let's go ahead and open up the index page inside of a web browser, and we're going to see that there is some work that is already done for us. If you jump into Dreamweaver and you take a look at, the folder and file structure here, you'll see that there's already a CSS document and an index document. They are linked, and we do have an H1, and the H1 is styled to have a font family and color, and the body tag is styled to be blue. That's what's giving us this entire blue background. So before we actually look at any code, this demo is going to focus on saving images as well as coding them. So you'll notice that there's nothing inside the IMG folder. That's because right now everything is inside of the working folder. Now the working folder is a folder that you would not upload. Reason being is because you wouldn't want anyone to have access to your working files. Because if they did, if it's online, they can get it and then they can take ownership of it. So you don't want to put these files online. Plus they do get pretty large in file size. A couple of meg is actually pretty big for a web file size. So you don't really want anything to be this big. You want to stick with it in kilobytes for most files. So your PSDs, your AIs, your InDesign files, those are going to go inside of your working folder. But whenever you want to or are ready to save them, they should be saved inside of the image folder. For today, we're actually going to start with the star AI. So let's go ahead and open up that star image inside of Illustrator. Okay, so we have a vector file. Whenever you have a vector file, hopefully the first thing that comes to your mind is vector. A vector file saved for web is an SVG. Now, if you don't remember how you're supposed to save each file depending on what it is or what is in it, well, in Blackboard, there is a image formats flowchart.pdf. And this would probably be pretty helpful for you to save into your web folder somewhere, just so that way you always have easy access to it. So it says whenever you're working with your master image, which in this case is an Illustrator file, start asking yourself these questions. So first, do you have original artwork like a vector file? Well, yeah, we do actually. Well, then save it as an SVG. Okay, great. So in this case, I don't have any text, so I don't have to create outlines. If you did have text in your vector artwork, then you'd want to take that text and create outlines first. In this case, we can just do File, Save As, and we want to make sure that we save this one as an SVG, and make sure it goes inside of your image folder, and then hit Save. Just to show you, you do not have to click on this part, but just to show you, this is actually all the code that goes into making an actual SVG file. All right, so just hit OK. And I'm going to minimize that for a moment, and let's go back to Dreamweaver, to our HTML, and we are going to code that in. Make my code a little bit larger. Okay, so I'm going to do left caret IMG, so the element is IMG, source, which is SRC, and we want to be able to start to code these file paths without Dreamweaver's help. So can we see the image folder on the same root as index? Yes, we can. The image folder is right here, so we can just type IMG. You only type a folder name for going inside of it. Well, typing IMG puts us inside of it. Is the star image there? Yeah, it is. So we would just write star.svg. We want to make sure we have an alt attribute, alternate text. So I'll write, oh, not sharding, shooting star. And then we'll give it a class, just that way we can style it separately, and I'll just call it star. Okay, so Command or Control S, come back here and refresh. Now, if you notice, Illustrator had a white background and our file does not. That's because in Illustrator, the white is actually transparent. It's just simulating paper, but we're not outputting for print. We are outputting for a screen. So this is saying, and it's saving in its true format, which is a transparent background. If you did want a white box back here, you would have to take your rectangle shape tool and actually draw the rectangle. The other thing to note about an SVG file is that if your artboard were bigger, so we'll just make it big like that, and then I'm just gonna quickly, you don't have to do this part, you can just watch here. I'll do save as. Okay, give it everything that's the same, so it asks you to replace. Okay, and then come in here and refresh. Now it looks like my image is gone. If I scroll down, here it is. So what's happening is it doesn't know to crop your artboard to your artwork. If you tell your image that you want it to be this big, well, this is all transparent space up here. So you want to make sure that you keep your artboard nice and close to your artwork. So crop it in tight there. Same thing, file, save as. So that all happened without touching any code. So whenever you're saving images, you should just be able to come in and refresh. Okay, perfect. So now an SVG file is responsive. It's like that by nature. It is going to respond to the size of the browser window. What if you don't want it to respond to the size of the browser window? Okay, that might be an issue. So you should always put a max width on it. And honestly, you probably don't want this image to be this big anyway. So let's go back to Dreamweaver. And an SVG is going to come in like this. Again, it's going to show you all that code. You don't have to touch anything of that. We'll just go to the CSS. And we will style .star because we put a class on it called star. And I am going to give it a max width. The max width that I'm going to give it is, I'll do 600 pixels. And I will say prevents the image from expanding past 600 pixels in width. So that means that once it reaches 600 pixels, it will not grow anymore. Okay, so file, save all, and then refresh. There we go. It grows, and then it stops. Okay, it grows and then it stops. So perfect. So that is working with SVG. So kind of a lot of information there. So definitely do not hesitate to kind of come back to this video if the SVG stuff is kind of tripping you up. So basically, if you need it to be a vector file, it needs to be an SVG. If it's going to have type inside of that image, make sure you create outlines out of that text first. Okay, next we are going to move on to a different file. So I'm actually going to minimize this and go back to the demos folder. Okay, the next one that we're going to work with is flower.psd. So let's go ahead and open that in Photoshop. All right, so whenever you're working with a file in Photoshop, first we want to check the color profile. So I can already see that the color profile is incorrect here. So I'm going to go up to Image, Mode, RGB. Whenever I click this, it's not going to change the color at all. It's just going to change the way that the color space is whenever I save it. Okay, so I'm going to click that. Okay, so that is good. Next thing I want to do is come up and go to Image, Image Size. Now, if I wanted to change this for whatever reason, maybe I wanted to, let's say I wanted to make it smaller. I could just come in and change that here. What I need to do here is actually change the resolution because the resolution is too high for a screen output. It should be 72. Now notice that it changes the width when I do that. I'm actually going to hold down the Option or Alt key because whenever you do that in a window, the cancel button changes to reset. So I'm going to click that. If you ever want to change the resolution without adjusting the width of and height, just uncheck the resample and change it to 72, and then you can check it again and you will see that it's still the 806. So it's adjusted your pixels a little bit, but it isn't going to do anything in terms of quality here. So I will do that and then I'll hit OK. And now I'm ready to save it. So I'll do File, and we will do Export, Save for Web. Okay, so if we go back to that chart, it's going to say, is it vector? No. Is it an animation? No. Do we need part of it to be transparent? No. Well, does it have a lot of values like a photo or a gradient? Yes. Well, in that case, it needs to be a JPEG. Okay, got it. So with the JPEG, you want to make sure that you adjust the quality. See how low you can get the quality without seeing any anti-aliasing. So that's kind of where the edges get really, they almost kind of look like a staircase instead of a nice smooth line. So this one, probably do around 50 or so and be okay. So I'll hit save. Again, make sure this goes inside of your image folder, flower.jpg. And then we'll go back to Dreamweaver, to our HTML, and let's code it in. Okay, so img space src, and this one's going to be image/flower.jpg. Go outside of the quotes and do space alt, and like you could call this like purple flower or pink flower. Okay, you want to be at least a little bit descriptive with these. And then go outside of your quote and again do a class, and we'll just call it a flower. Okay, so I'm going to do File, Save All, and then I'll come in and refresh. So there's my image. It's not responsive right now, meaning it's not changing to meet the size of my browser window. So that's not good for a user and the experience that they're having. So let's go to the CSS, and you honestly can style this next one anywhere. I just like to keep all my elements together when I can. So I'm actually going to style this above star, and I'm just going to type img. So I'm actually styling all images whenever I do this because I'm styling the img element. And what I'm going to do is put a width on it of 100%. Now you could just as easily, instead of this being 100%, like this could be 82%. You can make it whatever you want. For right now, I'm just going to do 100%. Okay, so let's do File, Save All, and then refresh, and now it fits the browser window size. But look what happens whenever it gets too big. It's pixelated and distorted and looks a little bit blurry, so that's not good. So what we want to do is use max width to prevent it from growing too far. So I will do flower, max width, and for this one, I believe the max width was 802, I think. So I will do prevents the image from expanding past 802 pixels in width. It is important that you guys start to comment your code. So you want to start to leave these things in here and do things that make comments that make sense. Okay, so we'll do save all. And then it stops growing at a certain point. So that's great because that's exactly what we wanted. Okay, so that was it for the flower. I'm going to come into Photoshop and I can close this because I do not need it anymore. And we can move on to our next image. Okay, so I'm going to minimize Photoshop. And the next image that I'm going to look at is the worker.psd. So I'm going to go ahead and open that one in Photoshop. Okay, so we kind of have this disgruntled employee here. So same thing, let's check the color profile. It's RGB, so we're actually good there. Let's also go up and do image size. Well, the resolution's a little bit too high. I'm going to uncheck resample, and I will do 72. You don't always have to uncheck that. I'm just doing that so that way you guys can see that it makes that change, or that it doesn't make that change for you in pixels. And then hit OK. And now I'm ready to save it. So I will do File, Export, Save for Web. Okay, so back to that chart. Okay, do I have vector? No, none of this is vector. Does it contain animation? No. Do you need part of the image to be transparent? I do, actually, because if we go back and look, the background was supposed to be transparent. So then it's a ping 24. In a JPEG, it tries to fill that with a color, and that's coming from your matte color. So instead of JPEG, we want ping 24. And it is transparency, and this is one of the reasons why ping 24 is a larger file size. It can do the nice tones of a photograph or a gradient, but it also can handle transparency. So you gotta sacrifice something somewhere. You can't have the best of all worlds here. So we've got a little bit of everything with what we want with this image, but that also means that the file size is going to increase. And that's why it's really important not to just save everything as a ping, because then it is going to increase your file size, which could increase load time. And be honest, would you stay at a website like Amazon if it was taking too long to load all the images? No. If you're being honest, you wouldn't. You would move on. So keep your file sizes small. Okay, so I will hit save, and it can just save it right inside the image folder. Again, make sure you're inside of image demo, and then hit save. Minimize that, and let's go back to Dreamweaver, to the HTML, and we're going to code in the worker. So I'm going to do left caret img space src, and this one is the img/worker.png. The alt attribute will say angry worker guy person, and then the class would be we'll just say worker, and hit save. Okay, so Command or Control S, or you could do File Save All. Perfect. Okay, so let's come back in here, refresh. We have a new image here. However, he is going to keep growing in file size, or I should say just in size, and real big and scary right there on your screen. So we don't want it to stay like this, right? So let's go in with code and tell it to not expand past a certain point. So in our CSS, let's style worker, and let's say max width. Whoops, that's height. Max width. And then the max width for this one was actually smaller. Let's just do 500 pixels. Again, just putting in the comment. And then do file, save all, refresh, and there we go. Nice and small. That's what we want. Even in this case, like, it's only responsive for a little bit, but you want to remember that if someone's looking at this on a phone, a lot of phones are still smaller in width than this browser is. So don't be fooled and think, oh, I only have to worry about it in this width because that's all that my browser window does. Well, not everyone's going to be looking at it in the same size. All right, so that takes care of that image. So for the most part, this is how you would go through and save images for web. You would open them in whichever program you're working with, and then check the color space, check the color profile, check the resolution, and then from there you need to go through that flow chart and decide what type of file format the image should be. Okay, if it's a vector, it's SVG. If it's animation, which most of you probably aren't going to be dealing with that too much, but it's a GIF. If it needs transparency, then it's a ping. If it doesn't need transparency, it's just a photograph or a gradient, then it's probably going to be a JPEG. Okay, so the last thing that I want to look at is the background images. So we have looked at images just placed in the HTML, but how could you go about changing it and making it so that instead of there being a blue background color, we have an image? Well, let's open up, there's ocean background, and I'm just going to shift click pattern, and I'm going to open up both of them with Photoshop. All right, now just to show you, they both are already the right color profile and the right resolution. So I'm just going to show you both of those. You don't have to do anything here. I'm opening these up solely to show you that they're a-okay. If they weren't, then you hopefully know how to fix that by now. Okay, so I'm going to play around with putting either one of those images in as a background image and see how that looks. Now you don't have to do anything in HTML. If you want to fill a browser window with a color or image, you can style it either on the HTML tag or on the body tag. Either one will work. So in this case, we already have the body tag, so we're just going to work with that. I am going to comment out the background color because I don't need that right now. And instead, I'm going to put in a background image URL, and let's think about it. What should my file path be? What should my file path be? So I am inside of the CSS folder. Okay, so I'm in styles.css. Do I see the image folder in here? No, I don't. So I have to go out of this CSS folder. If you ever have to go out of this folder, you have to hit that back button. That's a .. Okay, so that part right there is enough to give us a .. Okay, so now I'm just here in the image folder, or in the image demo folder. Do I see the image folder? Yeah, so double clicking to go inside of it, that's just writing the folder name. You only write a folder name if you go into it. You do not write the folder name if you're going out of it. Okay, and then lastly, do I see the file there? Well, actually, I didn't save them, so no. So let's jump back to Photoshop real quick, and let's do a file export, save for web. Okay, these don't have any transparency on them, so they should just be JPEGs. Okay, that quality actually looks pretty good, so I'll do save, my ocean background, and then go to pattern. Same thing, file, export, save. JPEG is good. Let's save both of those. All right. So I got both of them in there. All right. And back to Dreamweaver. So now I can just write pattern.jpg. Okay. So that pattern is, for the most part, it's seamless. And that's what you would want your pattern to be. So I can see that that pattern is filling my background window pretty easily. What if I tried ocean.bg? Okay, so again, I'm saving my code and refresh. Right now it doesn't look too bad, but if I make my window bigger, I can see that it's repeating. And if I went in and just said background-repeat, no repeat, it would only show up once. So that's not what I want either. So let me just show you this. See, so I'm Command or Control S to save. See how it only shows up once? That's not what I want. So here is where this photo or this document kind of comes in handy. So there is a property called background-size, and it can be set to contain or cover. Whenever you do contain, it basically says, let me see the entire image and let it fit in the viewport, which the viewport is just another way to say browser. Let it fit in the viewport and see the entire image. If there is extra open space because the browser window is too wide or too tall, oh well. The only thing it's concerned about is showing the entire image. If you want to fill that space, then you need background size cover. You need to use cover. And the only thing about that is it will cut off part of the image. So again, you kind of have to decide what you want to sacrifice. Do you want the empty space there, or do you want to cut some of it off? You can't have both and still have a proportional image. Okay, so just to show you, let's start with, we'll do size, and then I will do contain first. Okay, so no matter how wide I make my browser window, like that ocean background is going all the way to the edge. But see how it's repeating? It's because this image actually isn't very high, like it's not very tall. So that's why you're seeing it repeat down here. Again, you could do background repeat, no repeat, and then what I would do is I would sample whatever this bottommost color is and do background color. So it looks like it just kind of fades into the dark blue there. The other thing that you could do is cover. And then that's going to show the image so that way it fills the entire screen. But one thing to keep in mind, if I go back to Photoshop, is like, look, we're missing some of those sun rays or that light ray kind of coming through here, and we're missing the dark blue. So that's the only thing. In this case, we can scroll a little bit and see it, but you just have to kind of decide what it is you want to sacrifice there. Okay, so hopefully that kind of gives you a pretty good understanding of how to prepare your images for web and save them the correct way for web. Remember, you do not link to an Illustrator file or to a Photoshop file or InDesign file. It needs to be one of the ones that are on that flowchart. So definitely keep that flowchart handy. I think it's really going to help you out. If you have any questions about anything that was covered in this video, or if you're struggling with anything, as always, please make sure that you let me know, either in class, or you can send me an email or a remind message, so that way I can help you out. That's pretty much it for everything in this video. Have a good one.